Welcome, adamantium dreamers, to a journey through the long and winding path of one of comics' most enduring warriors. Tonight, we'll trace the complete story of Wolverine, from his mysterious origins in the Canadian wilderness to his evolution into Marvel's most beloved anti-hero. This is a tale that spans over 50 years of publication, countless battles, and the gradual unveiling of a man who has lived far longer than any human should. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and let your mind drift as we walk together through the shadows of Logan's past and present. There's no rush here, no need to remember every detail. Just let the story wash over you like moonlight through forest trees. Our story begins in the autumn of 1974, in the pages of the Incredible Hulk number 181, though sharp-eyed readers might have caught a tantalizing glimpse one issue earlier. It was a time when the comic book industry was searching for new directions, when creators were beginning to understand that readers craved characters with depth and mystery rather than simple heroic archetypes. Into this world of evolving storytelling stepped a figure who would become one of the most recognizable and beloved characters in all of comics, though his creators could never have imagined the cultural phenomenon they were unleashing. The man who would become known as Wolverine emerged from the creative minds of writer Len Wein and artist John Romita Sr., with crucial input from Herb Trimpe, who would handle much of the actual illustration work. In those early days, everything about Wolverine was intentionally shrouded in mystery. Wein understood something fundamental about human nature, that the less we know about a character, the more intriguing they become. This philosophy would guide Wolverine's development for decades, as creators carefully peeled back layers of his past, like the petals of some dark and beautiful flower. The character's first full appearance came in The Incredible Hulk number 181, and it was deliberately designed to make an immediate impact. Here was a figure unlike any other in the Marvel universe, short and stocky rather than tall and statuesque, fierce and mysterious rather than noble and transparent. His costume was a striking combination of blue and yellow, with distinctive pointed cowl pieces that gave him an almost demonic appearance. But it wasn't just his visual design that set Wolverine apart. From his very first panels, he demonstrated characteristics that would define him for decades to come. He was fearless in the face of the Hulk, perhaps the most physically powerful being in the Marvel universe. He possessed retractable claws that emerged from his hands, though in those early appearances, readers might have assumed they were part of his costume rather than his actual body. The story that introduced Wolverine to the world was steeped in Canadian wilderness and native folklore, involving a creature called the Wendigo, a cannibalistic monster from Algonquian legend. Marie Cartier and her brother George Baptiste were attempting to save Paul Cartier from a terrible curse that had transformed him into this immortal, flesh-hungry being. Their plan involved transferring the Wendigo's power to the Hulk, thus freeing Paul and returning him to human form. The Hulk had been mysteriously drawn to a cave in the Canadian wilderness, pulled by forces he couldn't understand toward a confrontation with the Wendigo. It was during this battle between two primal forces that Wolverine made his dramatic entrance, appearing on behalf of the Canadian government under the mysterious designation Weapon X. His mission was simple: capture and detain the Hulk. What followed was a three-way battle that showcased each character's unique attributes. The Hulk represented pure, unbridled strength and rage. The Wendigo embodied supernatural hunger and immortal endurance. And Wolverine demonstrated something different entirely: tactical intelligence, combined with savage ferocity, a warrior's instincts, wrapped in a mysterious package that hinted at depths yet to be explored. The creators were careful to establish Wolverine as more than just another costumed hero. His dialogue was sparse but memorable, delivered with a clipped, almost military precision that suggested extensive training and hard-won experience. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and his fighting style was unlike anything readers had seen before, less concerned with honor or fair play than with effectiveness and survival. Even in these earliest appearances, there were hints that Wolverine's abilities went beyond his claws and his courage. He seemed to recover from injuries with unusual speed, and his stamina appeared almost superhuman. These subtle details were planted like seeds in the reader's minds, waiting to bloom into the full concept of his healing factor in later stories. The Canadian setting was no accident. Vine and his collaborators were consciously creating a character who embodied the wilderness itself, untamed, dangerous, but possessed of its own natural wisdom. The vast forests and mountains of Canada became not just a backdrop but an extension of Wolverine's character, reflecting his dual nature as both civilized man and wild animal. The government connection, revealed through his Weapon X designation, added another layer of intrigue to the character. Here was someone who worked within official channels, but operated according to his own moral code. The tension between institutional loyalty and personal ethics would become a recurring theme throughout Wolverine's long history, as he struggled to balance his duty to various organizations with his innate sense of right and wrong. Marie Cartier's attempt to perform the occult ritual that would transfer the Wendigo's curse to the Hulk ultimately failed, leading to further conflict between all three combatants. But it was during these moments of magical manipulation and supernatural transformation that readers began to sense something deeper about Wolverine's nature. He seemed less affected by the mystical energies swirling around them, as if he possessed some innate resistance to forces that might overwhelm ordinary men. The intervention of Canadian officials brought the immediate conflict to an end, but not before establishing the dynamic that would define Wolverine's relationship with the Hulk for decades to come. They were natural opponents in many ways, the Hulk's mindless rage contrasting with Wolverine's focused aggression, the Green Giant's massive size dwarfing the compact warrior's frame. Yet there was also a strange kinship between them, a recognition of shared isolation, and the burden of powers that set them apart from normal humanity. John Romita Sr.'s design work for Wolverine was influenced by his understanding that this character needed to be distinctive and memorable, while also being practical for other artists to draw consistently. The pointed mask elements, the bold color scheme, and the overall proportions were all carefully considered to create a visual impact that would translate well across different artistic styles and reproduction methods. Herb Trimp's contribution to bringing Wolverine to life on the page cannot be understated. His understanding of anatomy and movement gave the character a physical presence that felt both realistic and dynamic. Trimp's Wolverine moved like a real fighter, with proper weight distribution and believable combat stances that suggested genuine martial arts training. The mystery surrounding Wolverine's true identity was maintained throughout these early appearances. Readers knew him only by his codename, and even that designation raised more questions than it answered. What was Weapon X? How did someone become part of such a program? What kind of training and modification might be involved in creating a human weapon capable of facing the Hulk without flinching? These questions would drive reader interest and creator imagination for years to come, as the character evolved from a one-time antagonist into something much more complex and compelling. The seeds planted in The Incredible Hulk number 181 would eventually grow into one of the most detailed and emotionally resonant backstories in all of comics. The relationship between Wolverine and the Canadian government, as established in these early stories, would prove to be another rich source of narrative tension. He was clearly working for official agencies, but his methods and attitude suggested someone who had little patience for bureaucracy or politics. This tension between service and independence would become a defining characteristic, as Wolverine repeatedly found himself caught between his loyalty to institutions and his commitment to his own moral compass. Even the brief nature of Wolverine's debut appearance in The Incredible Hulk worked in the character's favor. Like a ghost appearing from the wilderness, he arrived, made his impact, and departed, leaving readers wanting to know more. This approach of revealing just enough to intrigue, while withholding enough to mystify, would become a hallmark of Wolverine's early development. The success of this initial appearance opened doors for the character's future development, though nobody involved could have predicted the cultural phenomenon that would eventually emerge from these humble beginnings in a Hulk comic. The mysterious warrior from the Canadian wilderness had captured readers' imaginations, and they would not be satisfied until they learned much more about the man behind the mask. As we reflect on these earliest moments in Wolverine's publication history, we can see the careful craftsmanship that went into creating a character who would endure for decades. Every element, the visual design, the mysterious background, the hints of hidden depths, the Canadian setting, the government connections, was deliberately chosen to create maximum reader engagement, while leaving room for future expansion and exploration. The stage was now set for Wolverine's next great adventure, one that would take him from occasional guest star to core member of Marvel's most important superhero team, and begin the process of transforming him from enigmatic antagonist into beloved hero. The success of Wolverine's debut appearance in The Incredible Hulk had planted seeds of possibility, but by 1975, those seeds were struggling to find fertile ground in which to grow. The X-Men, Marvel's premier mutant superhero team, was facing a crisis that threatened to end their publication entirely. Sales had been declining steadily since their debut in 1963, and the series had been reduced to reprinting older stories rather than creating new adventures. The original X-Men lineup of Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Angel, Beast, and Iceman had failed to capture readers' imaginations in the way that Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and other Marvel properties had managed. There was something about the concept that felt incomplete, as if it was waiting for the right creative vision to unlock its true potential. The mutant metaphor was powerful, but it needed characters and stories that could give that metaphor genuine emotional weight and cultural relevance. Into this uncertain creative landscape stepped artist Dave Cockrum, a talented illustrator who had already made his mark at DC Comics with his work on the Legion of Superheroes. Cockrum brought with him a vision that was both ambitious and necessary. The idea that the X-Men could be revitalized by expanding beyond their American origins and embracing a truly international perspective. The world of the mid-1970s was becoming increasingly interconnected, with global communications and travel making distant countries feel closer than ever before. Cockrum understood that this changing world needed superhero teams that reflected its diversity, characters who could represent different cultures and perspectives while still working together toward common goals. His concept would not only save the X-Men from cancellation, but would fundamentally reshape how superhero comics approached diversity and representation. The project that would become Giant-Size X-Men #1 began with a simple but revolutionary premise. What if the X-Men recruited new members from around the world, creating a team that truly represented the global nature of the mutant phenomenon? This idea would require careful character development and cultural sensitivity, as each new team member needed to feel authentic to their background, while also fitting seamlessly into the existing X-Men mythology. Professor Charles Xavier, the telepathic leader and founder of the X-Men, provided the perfect narrative vehicle for this international recruitment drive. His vast telepathic abilities allowed him to sense mutants anywhere on Earth, and his resources and connections made it possible for him to travel wherever his mission required. Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants had always been global in scope. So, it made perfect sense that his team should reflect that international vision. The crisis that would drive this recruitment began during what should have been a routine mission to the mysterious island of Krakoa. The original X-Men team, along with newer recruits Havoc and Polaris, had vanished during their investigation of unusual mutant energy readings emanating from this remote location. Only Scott Summers, known as Cyclops, had managed to escape and return to Westchester to report the disaster to Professor Xavier. The loss of his students and colleagues presented Xavier with a terrible dilemma. The original X-Men had been like children to him, young people he had trained and guided from adolescence into adulthood. Their disappearance was not just a tactical setback, but a personal tragedy that struck at the heart of everything he had been working toward. Yet the mission to Krakoa had revealed something so dangerous that it could not be ignored or delayed while conventional rescue operations were organized. Xavier's solution was as bold as it was necessary. Rather than attempting a rescue with the limited resources at his disposal, he would assemble an entirely new team of X-Men, recruiting the most powerful mutants he could locate regardless of their nationality or current circumstances. This new international team would have the strength and diversity needed to face whatever had captured their predecessors, while also representing the kind of global cooperation that Xavier believed was essential for the future of human-mutant relations. The recruitment process took Xavier to some of the most remote and dangerous locations on Earth, places where powerful mutants had been living in isolation or struggling against persecution and misunderstanding. Each potential recruit represented not just a unique set of abilities, but also a different cultural perspective and life experience that would enrich the team's collective wisdom and effectiveness. His first stop was the Weapon X facility in Quebec, where he encountered the mysterious figure who had recently tangled with the Hulk. Logan, as he was known to the Canadian government officials who supervised his activities, was unlike any mutant Xavier had previously encountered. His combination of enhanced physical abilities, retractable claws, and accelerated healing made him formidable in combat. But it was his psychological profile that truly intrigued the professor. Major Chasen, the military officer overseeing Wolverine's activities, was reluctant to lose such a valuable asset. Logan had proven himself capable of handling missions that would be impossible for normal soldiers, and his unique abilities made him ideally suited for the kind of covert operations that governments preferred to handle without official acknowledgement. But Xavier's offer of true freedom, rather than just a longer leash, was too tempting for Logan to resist. The moment when Logan accepted Xavier's invitation marked a turning point, not just for the character, but for the entire X-Men concept. Here was someone who had been shaped by government programs and military thinking, a weapon who was being offered the chance to become something more than just a tool for others to use. His decision to cut his tie with Major Chasen was both literally and symbolically a severing of his connections to his past life as Weapon X. From the Canadian wilderness, Xavier traveled to the plains of Kenya, where he found a young woman whose powers over weather patterns had made her both revered and feared by local populations. Aurora Monroe, who would become known as Storm, represented a different kind of strength entirely. Where Logan was compact and aggressive, she was graceful and serene, her abilities flowing from a deep connection to the natural world rather than from technological enhancement or genetic manipulation. Storm's background as a street thief in Cairo and later as a worshipped goddess in the Kenyan highlands gave her a unique perspective on both human nature and the responsible use of power. Her recruitment added not just her formidable weather-controlling abilities to the team, but also a moral center and spiritual wisdom that would prove essential in the challenges ahead. The vast steppes of Russia provided Xavier with another crucial recruit in the form of Pyotr Rasputin, a gentle giant whose mutant ability allowed him to transform his body into organic steel. Colossus, as he would be known, embodied the best qualities of his homeland: strength, endurance, and unwavering loyalty to his friends and principles. His artistic nature, expressed through his talent for painting and sculpture, provided a beautiful counterpoint to his incredible physical power. From the mysterious region of Bavaria, Xavier recruited Kurt Wagner, a mutant whose appearance was so dramatically different from normal humans that he had been forced to hide in traveling circuses and shadowy corners of society. Nightcrawler's ability to teleport made him invaluable for reconnaissance and tactical operations, but it was his irrepressible humor and unshakable faith that would make him beloved by teammates and readers alike. The Canadian wilderness provided another recruit in the form of James MacDonald Hudson, though circumstances would prevent him from joining this initial mission. However, Xavier's global search did locate Shiro Yoshida in Japan, a young man whose ability to generate and control atomic fire came with the burden of his family's connection to the atomic bombings that had ended World War II. Sunfire's initial reluctance to join a team led by an American reflected the complex international tensions that these new X-Men would need to navigate. Sean Cassidy, known as Banshee, represented a bridge between the original X-Men and this new international roster. The Irish mutant had already encountered the team during previous adventures, and his sonic abilities and experience made him a valuable addition to the rescue mission. His presence also provided continuity for readers who might be confused by the sudden introduction of so many new characters. The final member of the recruitment drive was John Proudstar, a Native American mutant from Arizona whose enhanced strength and speed were matched by his fierce pride in his heritage. Thunderbird's tragic background and his complex relationship with both American society and his tribal traditions added another layer of diversity to the team, while also highlighting the different ways that marginalized communities experienced prejudice and discrimination. With his new international team assembled, Xavier faced the challenge of welding them into an effective fighting force in an impossibly short amount of time. These were individuals who had never worked together before, who spoke different languages and came from vastly different cultural backgrounds. Their only common ground was their mutant status and their willingness to risk everything to save strangers they had never met. Xavier's solution was both elegant and controversial. Using his powerful telepathic abilities, he implanted knowledge of English into the minds of team members who did not already speak the language, allowing them to communicate effectively during their mission. This mental intrusion raised ethical questions that would haunt Xavier for years to come, but in the immediate crisis, it was the only practical solution available. The newly formed team's first flight together aboard one of Xavier's specially modified aircraft was a study in barely controlled chaos. Logan's gruff suspicion of authority figures clashed with Cyclops' natural leadership instincts. Storm's serene confidence contrasted sharply with Nightcrawler's nervous humor. Colossus's gentle nature seemed almost incompatible with Thunderbird's aggressive pride, while Banshee tried to serve as a stabilizing influence on the entire group. Yet, despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, the team began to develop a unique chemistry during their approach to Krakoa. Each member brought not just their individual abilities, but also their distinctive perspective on what it meant to be a mutant in a world that often feared and hated their kind. Their diversity became a strength as they prepared to face whatever had captured their predecessors. The revelation that Krakoa was not merely an island, but actually a living mutant entity changed everything about their mission. This was not a conventional rescue operation against human or even superhuman adversaries, but an encounter with a form of life so alien that traditional tactics would be useless. The island itself was their enemy, a creature so vast and powerful that it could manipulate its own geography to create traps and obstacles for unwary visitors. The battle against Krakoa required every member of the new team to push their abilities to their limits while learning to work together under the most extreme circumstances possible. Storm's weather powers were essential for creating the atmospheric disturbances needed to disorient the living island. Nightcrawler's teleportation abilities allowed the team to move quickly across hostile terrain without falling victim to Krakoa's geographic manipulations. Colossus's strength and invulnerability made him the perfect point man for direct confrontations with the island's defenses, while Banshee's sonic powers provided both offensive capabilities and crucial reconnaissance through echolocation. Logan's healing factor and claws allowed him to survive injuries that would have incapacitated other team members, while his tracking abilities proved invaluable in locating the captured original X-Men. The rescue of their predecessors revealed the true scope of Krakoa's threat. The living island had been feeding on the life energy of mutants, growing stronger with each victim it consumed. The original X-Men had been kept alive but drained, their powers slowly being absorbed to fuel Krakoa's continued growth and evolution. Without immediate intervention, the creature would have eventually become powerful enough to threaten entire continents. The solution to the Krakoa crisis came from an unexpected source, Polaris, one of the captured mutants whose magnetic abilities had been weakened but not entirely suppressed by the island's energy drain. Working together with the new international team, she was able to use her powers to launch Krakoa into outer space, removing the threat while avoiding the moral complications that would have come with destroying a unique form of life. The aftermath of the Krakoa mission left both the original and new X-Men with profound questions about their future. The rescue had been successful, but it had also demonstrated that the threats facing mutant kind were evolving in ways that traditional superhero responses might not be adequate to address. The world was becoming more dangerous and more complex, requiring new approaches and new kinds of heroes. The decision to integrate the international recruits into the official X-Men roster was not made lightly. Professor Xavier understood that this expansion would fundamentally change the nature of his school and his mission. No longer would the X-Men be a small, tight-knit group of American teenagers learning to use their powers responsibly. Instead, they would become a truly international organization, with all the opportunities and challenges that such diversity would bring. Some of the original X-Men chose to step back from active duty, recognizing that this new era required different skills and perspectives than they possessed. Beast had already left to pursue his scientific career, while Angel and Iceman decided to take leave from the team to explore other aspects of their lives. Marvel Girl, now calling herself Phoenix, remained with the team but in a changed role, as did Cyclops, who found himself adapting his leadership style to work with these very different new teammates. The cultural impact of giant-size X-Men #1 extended far beyond the comic book industry. Here was a superhero team that looked like the real world, with members from different races, nationalities, and backgrounds working together as equals. At a time when American society was still grappling with issues of civil rights and international cooperation, the X-Men offered a vision of what global unity might look like. Dave Cockrum's character designs for the new X-Men were revolutionary in their attention to cultural authenticity and visual distinctiveness. Each costume reflected both the characters' abilities and their cultural background, creating a visual language that celebrated diversity rather than homogenizing it. Storm's costume incorporated elements of African design traditions, while Nightcrawler's appearance drew from European circus and theatrical traditions. The success of giant-size X-Men #1 proved that readers were hungry for this kind of inclusive storytelling, But it also created pressure on future creative teams to maintain the same level of cultural sensitivity and character development. The International X-Men were not just colorful additions to the roster, but fully realized individuals with their own motivations, conflicts, and growth arcs. Logan's integration into this diverse team was particularly significant because it marked the beginning of his evolution from mysterious loner to reluctant family member. His initial suspicion and hostility toward his new teammates gradually gave way to grudging respect and eventually to deep loyalty and affection. The process would take years to complete, but the foundation was laid during these first adventures together. The challenge facing Chris Claremont, who would soon take over writing duties for the series, was how to maintain the momentum and vision that Giant-Size X-Men #1 had established. The diverse international team was now in place, but they needed stories that would allow each character to grow and develop, while also exploring the larger themes of prejudice, acceptance, and cooperation that the X-Men concept was uniquely positioned to address. As we settle deeper into our exploration of Wolverine's journey, we can see how his recruitment into the X-Men represented more than just a career change. It was the beginning of his transformation from weapon to hero, from isolated outsider to integral family member. The seeds of that transformation were planted in the Canadian wilderness during his first meeting with Professor Xavier, but they would need the nurturing environment of the X-Men family to truly flourish. The stage was now set for the next phase of Wolverine's evolution, as he and his new international teammates began the long process of learning to work together, trust each other, and fight for Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants. The mysterious warrior from the north was about to become something he had never been before, part of a family that would accept him exactly as he was, while challenging him to become everything he could be. The arrival of Chris Claremont as the new writer for Uncanny X-Men in 1975 marked the beginning of what would become one of the most influential creative runs in comic book history. When Claremont inherited the series from Len Wein, he was taking on a project that most people in the industry considered a lost cause. The X-Men had been struggling with poor sales for years, and even the successful launch of the international team in Giant-Size X-Men #1 had not yet proven that the concept could sustain long-term reader interest. Claremont brought with him a vision that was both ambitious and deeply personal. He understood that superhero comics had the potential to be more than simple adventure stories, that they could serve as vehicles for exploring complex themes of identity, belonging, and social justice. His approach to the X-Men would emphasize character development over spectacle, relationships over action, and emotional truth over convenient plot resolutions. The young writer's background had given him a unique perspective on the themes that would define his X-Men run. Having spent part of his childhood in different countries and cultures, Claremont understood what it felt like to be an outsider, to struggle with questions of identity and belonging. This personal experience would inform his approach to writing mutant characters, helping him create stories that resonated with readers who had experienced their own forms of alienation and discrimination. Working alongside artist Dave Cockrum, who had co-created many of the international X-Men, Claremont began the delicate process of developing these new characters while maintaining the momentum that Giant-Size X-Men had established. Each member of the team needed their own distinct voice, their own character arc, and their own reasons for being part of Xavier's dream. This was particularly challenging with Logan, whose mysterious background and antisocial tendencies made him difficult to integrate into a team dynamic. In those early issues, Wolverine remained something of an enigma even to his fellow X-Men. He was clearly the most experienced fighter among them, moving with a precision and ruthlessness that suggested extensive military or paramilitary training. His healing factor was beginning to manifest more clearly, allowing him to recover from injuries that would have hospitalized normal humans. Yet, despite these advantages, He often seemed like the most vulnerable member of the team, struggling with inner demons that none of his teammates fully understood. Claremont's genius lay in recognizing that Wolverine's greatest strength and his greatest weakness were fundamentally the same thing: his inability to form lasting emotional connections with others. The trauma that had shaped him into such an effective warrior had also left him isolated and alone, unable to trust or be trusted. The X-Men represented his first real opportunity to be part of a family, but his past had given him no template for how such relationships were supposed to work. The decision to make Wolverine's claws a part of his actual anatomy, rather than components of his costume, was made during these early Claremont issues, though the full implications of this choice would not be explored until much later. The revelation that his claws emerged from his hands added a visceral, almost disturbing element to his character that set him apart from every other hero in comics. Here was someone whose very body was a weapon, who could never completely disarm himself or appear truly harmless to others. This anatomical detail also reinforced the central tragedy of Wolverine's existence. He was simultaneously the most human and the least human member of the team. His emotional struggles, his need for acceptance and belonging, his capacity for both love and rage, these were profoundly human characteristics. Yet his physical nature, his healing abilities, and his extended lifespan set him apart from the normal human experience in ways that created perpetual isolation. Dave Cockrum's artistic interpretation of Wolverine during this period established many of the visual elements that would define the character for decades. His depiction emphasized Logan's compact, muscular build and his distinctive hairstyle, creating an image that was both animalistic and oddly elegant. Cockrum understood that Wolverine needed to look dangerous, even when standing still, but also capable of surprising gentleness when the situation required it. The relationship between Claremont and Cockrum was crucial during this developmental phase, as they worked together to establish not just individual character traits, but also the team dynamics that would drive future storylines. Wolverine's interactions with each of his teammates revealed different aspects of his personality, from his protective instincts towards Storm to his grudging respect for Cyclops' leadership abilities. The romantic tension between Wolverine and Jean Grey that Claremont began to develop during this period was perhaps one of his most controversial creative decisions. Jean was already involved with Scott Summers, and their relationship had been one of the few stable elements in the original X-Men lineup. By introducing Logan as a potential rival for Jean's affections, Claremont was creating a love triangle that would generate dramatic tension for years to come. This romantic subplot worked on multiple levels within the larger themes of the series. It demonstrated that Logan's isolation was not entirely self-imposed, that he was capable of deep emotional connections even if he struggled to express or act upon them. It also highlighted the moral complexity that would become a hallmark of Claremont's writing. There were no clear villains in this situation, just people trying to navigate complicated feelings while dealing with extraordinary circumstances. The Jean Scott Logan triangle also served as a vehicle for exploring different approaches to heroism and leadership. Scott represented the traditional superhero ideal: disciplined, selfless, committed to the greater good even at personal cost. Logan embodied a more pragmatic approach, willing to break rules and cross moral lines when he believed it was necessary to protect those he cared about. Jean found herself caught between these two philosophies, drawn to both men for very different reasons. Claremont's development of this romantic dynamic was subtle and gradual, unfolding over months and years rather than being resolved quickly through dramatic confrontations. He understood that the most compelling relationships are built through small moments and quiet conversations rather than grand gestures and he gave each member of the Triangle opportunities to grow and change as the story progressed. The collaboration between Claremont and artist John Byrne, who joined the series with issue 108, marked the beginning of what many consider the creative peak of the X-Men franchise. Byrne brought a clean, dynamic, artistic style that perfectly complemented Claremont's character-driven storytelling approach. More importantly, Byrne shared Claremont's vision for what the X-Men could become and was willing to invest the time and effort necessary to develop that vision fully. Byrne's advocacy for keeping Wolverine on the team when other creators were considering dropping the character proved to be one of the most important decisions in Marvel Comics history. As a fellow Canadian, Byrne felt a personal connection to Logan and was determined to explore the character's potential more fully. His artistic interpretation of Wolverine emphasized the character's feral nature, while also highlighting his underlying humanity. The introduction of Wolverine's brown and gold costume in Uncanny X-Men number 139 was the result of close collaboration between Claremont and Byrne. They wanted a design that would be more practical and visually striking than the original blue and yellow outfit, while also reflecting Logan's evolution as a character. The removal of the shoulder pads and tiger stripes created a cleaner, more mature look that better suited the character's developing role within the team. This costume change was more than just a visual update. It represented Wolverine's growing integration into the X-Men family and his acceptance of his role as a hero rather than just a weapon. The earthy colors reflected his connection to the natural world, while the simpler design suggested a character who was becoming more comfortable with himself and his place in the world. Byrne's character development of Wolverine drew heavily on his understanding of Canadian culture and mythology. He saw Logan as embodying certain archetypal elements of the Canadian national character: tough, resilient, unpretentious, and fiercely loyal to those who earned his respect. This cultural grounding gave the character a depth and authenticity that resonated with readers around the world. The modeling of Wolverine's appearance on actor Paul D'Amato from the film Slapshot was a stroke of creative genius that gave the character a more realistic and relatable physical presence. D'Amato's combination of toughness and vulnerability, his ability to appear both dangerous and sympathetic, provided the perfect template for bringing Logan to life on the comic book page. The introduction of Kitty Pryde in Uncanny X-Men number 129 provided Wolverine with his first opportunity to develop a truly nurturing relationship with another person. The 13-year-old mutant who could phase through solid matter was everything that Logan was not: young, innocent, trusting, and optimistic about the future. Yet from their first meeting, there was a natural affinity between them that surprised both characters and readers alike. Logan's protective instincts toward Kitty revealed aspects of his personality that had been hidden beneath layers of cynicism and emotional armor. With her, he could be gentle without appearing weak, caring without seeming vulnerable. She represented hope and possibility in a way that his adult teammates, for all their virtues, could not. Their relationship would become one of the most important and enduring in Wolverine's long history. The revelation of Logan's real name during this period was handled with characteristic subtlety by Claremont. Rather than making it the focus of a major storyline, the information was revealed almost casually, as if it was simply one more piece of the puzzle that was Logan's identity. The choice of the name Logan, inspired by Mount Logan in Canada, reflected Claremont's understanding that the character's mysteries should be unveiled gradually and naturally. This approach to character development, revealing information slowly and allowing readers to piece together the larger picture over time, became a hallmark of Claremont's writing style. He understood that mystery was one of Wolverine's greatest assets and was determined not to squander that mystery through hasty exposition or unnecessary revelations. The Days of Future Past storyline, which ran in Uncanny X-Men numbers 141 and 142, showcased Wolverine in a completely different context, while highlighting themes that had been building throughout Claremont's run. The dystopian future where Sentinels had conquered America and enslaved or killed most mutants presented a world where Logan's survival skills and combat experience were essential for the resistance movement. In this alternate timeline, an older Wolverine had survived decades of persecution and warfare, becoming one of the few X-Men still alive and free. His role as a leader and strategist in this desperate situation demonstrated how much the character had grown since his introduction as a loner and outsider. The future Logan was still recognizably the same character, but he had evolved into someone capable of inspiring and organizing others in the face of seemingly impossible odds. The time travel plot that brought Kitty Pryde's consciousness back to prevent this dark future gave Logan an opportunity to play a crucial role in saving not just the X-Men but all of mutant kind. His willingness to trust Kitty's story and support her mission, despite its apparently fantastic nature, showed how much his capacity for faith and hope had grown during his time with the team. This storyline also established Logan's role as the team's survivor, the one who could endure when others fell, who could maintain hope when others despaired. This aspect of his character would become increasingly important in future stories, as writers used his extended lifespan and healing abilities to explore themes of loss, memory, and the burden of outliving those you love. The relationship between Logan and Scott Summers that developed during the Claremont Byrne era was complex and nuanced, reflecting the writer's understanding that leadership and heroism could take many different forms. Scott represented the ideal of disciplined, selfless heroism, always putting the needs of others before his own desires. Logan embodied a more pragmatic approach, willing to make hard choices and live with difficult consequences. Rather than presenting these approaches as incompatible, Claremont and Byrne showed how they could complement each other. Scott's moral clarity and strategic thinking provided direction and purpose for the team, while Logan's experience and tactical flexibility allowed them to adapt to changing circumstances. Their rivalry over Jean Grey added personal stakes to their professional relationship without undermining their mutual respect and shared commitment to protecting innocent people. The development of Logan's relationship with Aurora Monroe during this period was equally important, though it received less dramatic attention than his involvement in the Scott-Jean-Logan triangle. Storm's serene strength and deep connection to the natural world seemed to have a calming effect on Logan's more volatile tendencies. She was one of the few people who could challenge his decisions without triggering his defensive reactions, and her respect for the natural order resonated with his own instinctive understanding of life and death. Their friendship was built on mutual recognition of each other's strength and dignity, rather than romantic attraction or shared trauma. Storm saw past Logan's rough exterior to the honorable man beneath, while he recognized in her the kind of natural nobility and wisdom that he had rarely encountered in his long and often brutal life. The exploration of Logan's extended lifespan during this period added another layer of tragedy and complexity to his character. Unlike his teammates, who were mostly young people just beginning their adult lives, Logan carried the weight of decades or possibly centuries of experience. This temporal isolation was perhaps even more profound than his emotional isolation, as he alone among the X-Men understood how fleeting human connections could be. This aspect of his character allowed Claremont to explore themes of mortality and legacy that were unusual in superhero comics. Logan's perspective on death and loss was fundamentally different from that of his teammates, shaped by the knowledge that he would likely outlive most or all of the people he cared about. This awareness added poignancy to his relationships and urgency to his commitment to Xavier's dream. The gradual revelation of Logan's healing factor and its implications was handled with the same careful attention to character development that characterized all of Claremont's best work. Rather than simply presenting it as a convenient plot device, the healing ability was shown to have profound psychological and emotional consequences for Logan himself. The knowledge that he could survive almost any injury created a sense of isolation that went beyond normal human experience. Pain and vulnerability, which connected most people to their mortality and to each other, were temporary experiences for Logan. This invulnerability, which others might see as a blessing, was revealed to be another form of curse, separating him from the common human experience in fundamental ways. The team dynamics that evolved during the Claremont Byrne era established patterns that would influence X-Men stories for decades to come. Logan's role as the team's conscience and moral compass, someone who could make hard decisions when others hesitated, became a central part of the X-Men's operational philosophy. His willingness to cross lines that his more idealistic teammates would not cross made him invaluable in situations where pure heroism was insufficient. Yet this role also carried significant personal costs for Logan himself. Being the one who was willing to kill when killing was necessary, to lie when lying was required, to carry the moral burden of compromise and expedience, took a psychological toll that his healing factor could not address. His teammates' continued acceptance and respect, despite their knowledge of what he was capable of, became crucial to his emotional survival. As Claremont's first major era on the X-Men drew toward its conclusion, Logan had been transformed from a mysterious antagonist into one of the most complex and compelling characters in all of comics. The foundation had been laid for decades of future development, but the essential elements of his character, the struggle between savagery and civilization, the search for family and belonging, the burden of being a survivor in a world of mortality, had been firmly established. The success of this character development was evident not just in sales figures and critical acclaim, but in the genuine emotional investment that readers had developed in Logan's journey. He had become more than just an entertaining fictional character. He had become a symbol of resilience and redemption, proof that even the most damaged person could find family, purpose, and peace. The stage was now set for the next phase of Logan's evolution, as future creators would build upon the solid foundation that Claremont and his artistic collaborators had constructed. The mysterious warrior who had first appeared in the Canadian wilderness had become James Logan, a man with a past he was still discovering and a future full of possibility. The year 1982 marked a pivotal moment in Wolverine's evolution from supporting character to cultural icon. Marvel Comics had recognized the growing popularity of Logan among readers and decided to give him his first solo adventure, a 4-issue limited series that would delve deeper into his mysterious past while exploring new dimensions of his character. The creative team chosen for this ambitious project consisted of writer Chris Claremont, who had already done so much to develop Wolverine's personality within the X-Men, and artist Frank Miller, whose innovative work on Daredevil had established him as one of the medium's most distinctive visual storytellers. The collaboration between Claremont and Miller represented a perfect fusion of complementary talents and sensibilities. Claremont brought his deep understanding of Logan's psychological complexity and his gift for character-driven storytelling, while Miller contributed his noir sensibilities and his ability to find beauty in darkness. Together, they would create what many consider to be the definitive Wolverine story, one that would influence every subsequent interpretation of the character. The decision to set this first solo adventure in Japan was both artistically and commercially inspired. The early 1980s had seen a growing fascination with Japanese culture in American popular media, from the rising influence of Japanese cinema to the increasing prominence of martial arts philosophy in action, entertainment, Japan represented a perfect backdrop for exploring the themes of honor, discipline, and the struggle between civilization and savagery that were central to Wolverine's character. Miller's vision for the series was heavily influenced by classic film noir and samurai cinema, creating a visual and thematic framework that emphasized moral ambiguity, personal sacrifice, and the code of honor that separated true warriors from mere killers. His approach to Logan was to strip away the superhero trappings and focus on the man beneath the costume, exploring what it meant to be a warrior in a world where the old certainties no longer applied. The story began with Logan in a state of emotional turmoil, haunted by memories of his time in Japan and his relationship with Mariko Yashida, a woman who represented everything he thought he could never have: beauty, grace, acceptance, and the possibility of redemption. His decision to return to Japan was driven not by any mission or obligation, but by his need to understand what had gone wrong and whether there might still be hope for the connection he had lost. Claremont's opening line for the series would become one of the most famous quotes in all of comics. "I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do isn't very nice." This simple statement captured the essential tragedy of Logan's existence. His extraordinary skill at violence and survival, combined with his deep awareness of the moral cost of that skill. It was a line that acknowledged both his capabilities and his humanity, his pride and his shame. The Japan that Logan encountered upon his return was a country caught between tradition and modernity, where ancient honor codes existed alongside contemporary corruption, and where the old ways of the samurai struggled to survive in a world dominated by technology and commerce. This cultural tension mirrored Logan's own internal conflicts, making Japan not just a setting but a reflection of his psychological state. Mariko Yashida represented more than just a romantic interest for Logan. She embodied the possibility of spiritual transformation and moral redemption. Her grace, intelligence, and deep commitment to honor offered him a vision of what he might become if he could transcend his violent past and embrace a more civilized way of life. Yet, their relationship was complicated by the vast differences in their backgrounds, their cultural contexts, and their understanding of duty and obligation. The revelation that Mariko had been forced into marriage with a man who abused her physically and emotionally created a moral crisis for Logan that went to the heart of his character. His instinctive response was to solve the problem through violence, to eliminate the threat in the most direct way possible. Yet Mariko's own sense of honor and family obligation made such a simple solution impossible, forcing Logan to confront the limitations of his usual problem-solving methods. Lord Shingen Yashida, Mariko's father, and the head of one of Japan's most powerful Yakuza families, served as both antagonist and teacher in Logan's journey of self-discovery. Shingen represented the dark side of the honor code that Logan was trying to understand and embrace. A man who used traditional concepts of duty and loyalty to justify cruelty and manipulation. His challenge to Logan was not just physical but philosophical, forcing him to examine what honor truly meant and whether it was possible to be both honorable and effective in a corrupt world. The duel between Logan and Shingen, fought with wooden swords rather than adamantium claws, was perhaps the most important scene in the entire series. This confrontation stripped away Logan's technological advantages and forced him to confront his opponent on equal terms, relying solely on skill, strategy, and strength of will. His defeat was both humiliating and educational, demonstrating that true mastery required more than raw power or healing abilities. Miller's depiction of this duel was a masterpiece of visual storytelling, using stark black and white contrasts and dynamic panel layouts to capture both the physical intensity of the combat and the psychological stakes involved. The fight was choreographed like a classical samurai drama, with each movement carrying symbolic weight and emotional significance beyond its immediate tactical purpose. Logan's humiliation at Shingen's hands was compounded by the setting. He was beaten in front of Mariko, the woman whose respect and love he most desired. This public defeat forced him to confront the gap between his self-image as an invincible warrior and the reality that skill and discipline could overcome brute force and natural advantages. The experience was devastating to his pride, but essential to his growth as both a fighter and a person. The aftermath of the duel saw Logan cast into the streets of Tokyo, wounded in body and spirit, forced to survive by his wits rather than his reputation. This period of vulnerability and uncertainty was crucial to his character development, as it required him to rely on qualities other than his mutant abilities and his capacity for violence. He had to learn humility, patience, and the value of strategic thinking over instinctive reaction. It was during this time of exile that Logan encountered Yukio, a character who would become one of the most important figures in his personal mythology. Yukio was a complex figure, part friend, part lover, part teacher, part tempter. She represented a different path from the one that Mariko offered, one that embraced the excitement and danger of living on society's margins while rejecting both conventional morality and traditional honor codes. Yukio's relationship with Logan was built on mutual recognition of each other's skills and understanding of each other's isolation. She was a Ronin like him, a warrior without a master, someone who had learned to survive by her wits and her weapons in a world that had little place for people like them. Their connection was immediate and intense, based on shared experience rather than romantic idealization. The dynamic between Mariko and Yukio in Logan's life represented two different aspects of his character and two possible futures. Mariko offered redemption through discipline and honor, the possibility of transcending his violent nature through commitment to higher principles. Yukio offered acceptance of his true nature, the freedom to be what he was without apology or compromise. Both relationships were genuine and important, but they pulled him in fundamentally different directions. The involvement of the Hand, the ancient ninja cult that served as one of Marvel's most persistent villains, added supernatural and mythological elements to the story that elevated it beyond simple crime drama or romance. The Hand represented pure evil in its most organized and disciplined form, a force that corrupted everything it touched while maintaining the external forms of honor and tradition. Logan's confrontations with the Hand served multiple narrative functions. On one level, they provided the action sequences that readers expected from a Wolverine story, showcasing his fighting skills and his ability to overcome seemingly impossible odds. On a deeper level, they forced him to confront questions about the nature of evil and the responsibility of those with the power to fight it. The Hand's attempts to recruit or corrupt Logan highlighted one of the central themes of the series: the thin line between the warrior and the assassin, between justice and vengeance, between using violence to protect and using it to destroy. The cult's sophisticated understanding of human psychology allowed them to present their offers in ways that were genuinely tempting, forcing Logan to examine his own motivations and desires. Mariko's own involvement with the Hand, whether willing or coerced, created a moral complexity that defied easy resolution. Her family's criminal connections and her own position within that network meant that saving her was not simply a matter of defeating external enemies, but of navigating a web of obligations, loyalties, and compromises that had no clear or clean solutions. The climactic confrontations of the series required Logan to integrate everything he had learned about honor, duty, love, and sacrifice into a coherent philosophy of action. He could not simply fight his way out of the situation, nor could he abandon Mariko to her fate. Instead, He had to find a way to honor his own principles while respecting hers, to protect what he valued without destroying it in the process. The resolution of Mariko and Logan's relationship was both satisfying and tragic, reflecting the mature themes that distinguished this series from more conventional superhero stories. Their love was real and deep, but it existed within a context of family obligations, cultural differences, and moral complexities that could not be overcome through good intentions alone. Their separation was not the result of villainous interference, but of genuine conflicts between equally valid but incompatible value systems. Miller's artistic interpretation of these themes was revolutionary in its sophistication and emotional depth. His use of negative space, shadow, and composition created a visual language that conveyed meaning as effectively as dialogue or narration. Each panel was carefully designed to advance both the plot and the emotional development of the characters, creating a reading experience that rewarded careful attention and multiple readings. The influence of Japanese woodblock prints and calligraphy on Miller's art was evident throughout the series, creating a visual style that honored the cultural setting while remaining accessible to Western audiences. His depiction of violence was stylized rather than graphic, emphasizing the consequences and emotions involved, rather than the physical details of combat. The success of the Wolverine limited series led directly to the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries, which built upon the themes and character development established in the Japan storyline. This 6-issue series, again written by Claremont but illustrated by Al Milgrom, explored the relationship between Logan and his youngest teammate, while delving deeper into the criminal underworld that connected Japan to the rest of the world. The decision to pair Wolverine with Kitty Pryde for this adventure was inspired both creatively and commercially. Their relationship had been one of the most popular aspects of the X-Men comics, and readers were eager to see more of their mentor-student dynamic. From a storytelling perspective, Kitty's presence allowed Logan to explore his protective and nurturing instincts while also providing a moral compass that kept him anchored to his better nature. The storyline took Kitty from her heartbreak over her breakup with Colossus to her emergence as a more confident and capable hero, using her connection with Logan as a catalyst for personal growth. Her journey paralleled Logan's own evolution from weapon to protector, showing how the lessons he had learned could be passed on to the next generation of mutants. Al Milgrom's artistic approach to the series was more conventional than Miller's, but no less effective in serving the story's needs. His character work emphasized the emotional connections between the protagonists, while his action sequences maintained the excitement and energy that readers expected from a Wolverine adventure. His depiction of Kitty's growth from uncertain teenager to confident hero was particularly well handled, showing her physical and emotional development through subtle changes in posture and expression. The establishment of Kitty's Shadowcat identity during this series was significant both for her character and for the larger X-Men mythology. The name itself reflected her evolution from the innocent Shadowcat to a more mature and capable hero, while her new costume design emphasized her growing confidence and independence. Logan's role in this transformation was crucial but understated, providing support and guidance without overwhelming her own agency and decision-making. The relationship between Logan and Kitty that was cemented during this series would become a template for his interactions with other young heroes throughout his long career. His ability to serve as both protector and teacher, to be fierce and gentle as circumstances required, would be demonstrated repeatedly in his relationships with characters like Jubilee, X-23, and many others. The themes of family, honor, and redemption that were explored in these early solo adventures would continue to resonate throughout Logan's character development for decades to come. The Japan storylines established him as more than just a mutant superhero. He was a man searching for meaning and connection in a world that seemed designed to deny both. His journey toward understanding and acceptance would continue through countless future adventures. but the foundation laid in these early stories would remain constant. The critical and commercial success of these solo adventures proved that Wolverine could sustain interest as a character independent of his role in the X-Men, opening the door for the ongoing solo series that would launch in 1988. More importantly, they established the mature, character-driven approach to superhero storytelling that would influence the entire comics industry throughout the 1980s and beyond. As we reflect on these pivotal, early solo adventures, we can see how they transformed Logan from a mysterious supporting character into a fully realized protagonist capable of carrying his own stories and exploring complex themes of identity, morality, and human connection. The warrior who had first appeared in the Canadian wilderness had become a complete character, one whose struggles and growth would continue to captivate readers for generations to come. The year 1991 brought with it a creative earthquake that would forever change how readers understood Logan's mysterious past. Barry Windsor Smith, an artist whose reputation had been built on his legendary work with Conan the Barbarian and his intricate, almost medieval approach to fantasy illustration, approached Marvel Comics with a proposal that would seem audacious even by the standards of an industry known for bold creative risks. He wanted to tell the story of Weapon X, the government program that had transformed Logan from man into living weapon, and he wanted to do it entirely on his own terms. Windsor Smith's vision for the Weapon X storyline was unlike anything that had been attempted in mainstream superhero comics. He proposed to write, illustrate, and color the entire project himself, maintaining complete creative control over every aspect of the storytelling process. This level of artistic autonomy was virtually unheard of at Marvel, where projects were typically handled by teams of creators working under editorial oversight. Yet the quality of Windsor Smith's sample pages and the power of his narrative concept convinced editor Jim Shooter to give him unprecedented creative freedom. The decision to grant Windsor Smith such complete control over the project reflected a growing recognition within the comics industry that certain stories required a unified artistic vision to achieve their full potential. The Weapon X storyline would deal with themes of torture, dehumanization, and psychological trauma that demanded careful handling and consistent tone. Windsor Smith's background in fine art and his reputation for meticulous craftsmanship made him uniquely qualified to tackle such challenging material. The story that Windsor Smith crafted was both a prequel to Logan's established history and a complete reimagining of what superhero comics could achieve in terms of emotional depth and artistic sophistication. Rather than focusing on action sequences or superhero adventure, Weapon X was structured as a psychological horror story that examined the process by which a human being could be systematically stripped of his humanity and rebuilt as a living weapon. The narrative began with Logan as a captive of the Weapon X program, already subjected to preliminary procedures that had left him confused, disoriented, and largely helpless. Windsor Smith made the deliberate choice to begin the story in the middle of Logan's ordeal, rather than showing how he came to be captured, creating an atmosphere of claustrophobia and helplessness that mirrored the protagonist's own psychological state. The scientists responsible for Logan's transformation were presented not as cackling supervillains, but as coldly professional researchers who viewed their subject as raw material for an important military project. Dr. Cornelius, Dr. Hines, and the figure known only as the Professor approached their work with clinical detachment, discussing Logan's suffering in the same terms they might use to describe the stress testing of mechanical components. This bureaucratic banality of evil was perhaps more disturbing than any amount of melodramatic villainy could have been. Windsor Smith understood that real horror often comes not from monsters but from ordinary people who have convinced themselves that their actions are justified by higher purposes. The Weapon X scientists had rationalized their torture of Logan as necessary for national security, allowing them to perpetrate unthinkable cruelties while maintaining their professional composure. The adamantium bonding process itself was depicted as a series of surgical procedures that pushed the boundaries of what was medically possible, while completely disregarding the consent or welfare of the subject. Windsor Smith's detailed knowledge of anatomy and physiology allowed him to create images that were both scientifically plausible and viscerally disturbing, showing the step-by-step process by which Logan's skeleton was infiltrated with liquid adamantium. The physical transformation was paralleled by a systematic assault on Logan's psychological identity. The scientists used a combination of drugs, sensory deprivation, and psychological conditioning to break down his sense of self and replace it with programmed responses designed to make him an effective killing machine. The process was shown to be as much about destroying the person Logan had been as about creating the weapon they wanted him to become. Windsor Smith's artistic approach to depicting this transformation was revolutionary in its sophistication and emotional impact. His panels flowed like a fever dream, with realistic anatomical details giving way to surreal imagery that captured Logan's psychological fragmentation. The coloring was equally innovative, using subtle gradations and unexpected hues to create an atmosphere that was both clinical and nightmarish. The psychological conditioning sequences were particularly powerful, showing Logan's memories and personality being systematically dismantled and rebuilt according to his captor's specifications. Windsor Smith visualized this process through fragmented imagery and overlapping time frames that conveyed the disorientation and confusion that Logan experienced as his identity was torn apart and reassembled. Throughout these sequences, Windsor Smith maintained focus on Logan's essential humanity, even as that humanity was being systematically attacked. Small details, a moment of fear in Logan's eyes, a gesture of defiance despite his helplessness, a fragment of memory that resisted the conditioning process, served to remind readers that beneath the scientific procedures was a man who was suffering in ways that transcended physical pain. The healing factor that had always been part of Logan's mutant abilities became both his salvation and his curse during the Weapon X process. His accelerated healing allowed him to survive procedures that would have killed any normal human being, but it also meant that his torment could continue indefinitely. Every wound healed, every trauma recovered from, only made it possible for his captors to inflict new forms of damage. Windsor Smith's depiction of the healing process was both beautiful and terrible, showing the miraculous regeneration of tissue and bone, alongside the psychological trauma that such unnatural recovery inevitably produced. Logan's healing factor meant that he could remember every moment of his torture with perfect physical clarity, unable to find relief even in the natural forgetfulness that might allow ordinary people to move past such experiences. The gradual awakening of Logan's animal instincts was portrayed as both a survival mechanism and a form of psychological rebellion. As his human identity was stripped away by the conditioning process, something deeper and more primal began to assert itself. This feral consciousness was less sophisticated than his original personality, but also more resilient, harder to break or manipulate through conventional psychological techniques. The escape sequence that formed the climax of Windsor Smith's narrative was a masterpiece of visual storytelling that combined brutal action with profound emotional release. Logan's breaking free from his restraints and his subsequent rampage through the Weapon X facility was portrayed not as a superhero action sequence, but as the desperate flight of a tortured animal finally given the opportunity to strike back at its tormentors. The violence of Logan's escape was both shocking and cathartic, representing not just physical liberation but psychological revenge against those who had sought to destroy his humanity. Windsor Smith's depiction of this violence was stylized rather than graphic, emphasizing the emotional significance of Logan's actions rather than their physical details. Each act of destruction was shown as a step in Logan's journey back toward his own identity and autonomy. The aftermath of the escape, showing Logan fleeing into the Canadian wilderness in a state of feral confusion, provided a powerful bridge between the Weapon X storyline and Logan's established history as a mysterious figure living on the margins of civilization. Windsor Smith showed how the trauma of the Weapon X experience had left Logan with fragmented memories and a deep mistrust of human institutions, explaining many of the character traits that had been established in previous stories. The themes of violation, recovery, and redemption that ran throughout Windsor Smith's Weapon X storyline resonated far beyond the specific context of Logan's origin story. The creator himself acknowledged that the story functioned as a metaphor for various forms of abuse and trauma, exploring how individuals could survive systematic attempts to destroy their identity and humanity. The clinical nature of Logan's torture, the way his captors justified their actions through appeals to higher purpose, and the long-term psychological effects of his ordeal, all serve to illuminate broader questions about the abuse of power and the resilience of the human spirit. Windsor Smith's handling of these themes was both sensitive and unflinching, acknowledging the reality of trauma while also celebrating the possibility of survival and recovery. The artistic techniques that Windsor Smith employed throughout the series pushed the boundaries of what was possible in comic book storytelling. His use of overlapping time frames, fragmented panel layouts, and symbolic imagery created a reading experience that was more like poetry than conventional narrative prose. Each page required careful study and contemplation, rewarding readers who were willing to engage with the material on multiple levels. The coloring work, which Windsor Smith handled himself, was particularly innovative in its use of subtle color variations to convey emotional states and psychological conditions. The sterile blues and greens of the laboratory sequences contrasted sharply with the warm earth tones of Logan's memories and the violent reds of his eventual escape. These color choices worked on a subconscious level to guide readers' emotional responses while reinforcing the story's thematic content. The critical reception of Weapon X was overwhelmingly positive, with reviewers praising both its artistic innovation and its mature handling of difficult themes. The story was recognized as a landmark achievement in superhero comics, proving that the medium could tackle serious subjects with sophistication and depth, while still maintaining its essential entertainment value. More importantly, Weapon X established a new understanding of Logan's character that would influence every subsequent interpretation of his story. The revelation of what had been done to him and how he had survived it added layers of complexity and sympathy to a character who had previously been defined primarily by his mystery and his capacity for violence. The impact of Windsor Smith's work extended beyond the specific details of Logan's origin to influence broader trends in comic book storytelling. The success of Weapon X demonstrated that readers were hungry for more mature and sophisticated narratives, helping to pave the way for the independent comics movement and the creator-owned projects that would reshape the industry throughout the 1990s. The psychological realism that Windsor Smith brought to Logan's story also influenced how other creators approached superhero characters, encouraging a more thoughtful examination of the emotional and psychological consequences of extraordinary experiences. The idea that superhuman abilities and heroic adventures might come with genuine trauma and lasting psychological effects became more widely accepted throughout the industry. The visual innovations pioneered in Weapon X influenced a generation of comic book artists, encouraging experimentation with non-traditional panel layouts, symbolic imagery, and more sophisticated approaches to coloring and design. Winsor Smith's demonstration that a single creator could maintain artistic control over every aspect of a project inspired other artists to seek greater creative autonomy in their own work. The ongoing influence of Weapon X can be seen in virtually every subsequent exploration of Logan's past, as creators have continued to build upon the foundation that Winsor Smith established while developing new aspects of the character's psychological complexity. The story's exploration of trauma and recovery has provided a template for understanding not just Logan's behavior, but the experiences of many other characters who have survived systematic abuse or dehumanization. As we settle deeper into our understanding of Logan's journey, the Weapon X revelation stands as perhaps the most crucial piece of his psychological puzzle. It explains not just how he acquired his adamantium skeleton, but why he struggles so deeply with questions of identity, autonomy, and human connection. The man who emerged from that Canadian laboratory was fundamentally changed, carrying scars that would never fully heal, despite his miraculous regenerative abilities. The legacy of Winsor Smith's masterpiece continues to resonate through Logan's story, reminding us that beneath the claws and the costume is a survivor of unthinkable trauma who has somehow managed to find meaning, purpose, and even love in the decades that followed his ordeal. The weapon that was created in those sterile laboratories gradually became a protector, proving that even the most systematic attempts to destroy human dignity and compassion can ultimately fail in the face of an unbreakable will to survive and to hope. The launch of Wolverine's first ongoing solo series in 1988 represented a watershed moment not just for the character, but for the entire comic book industry. The success of his limited series appearances had proven that Logan could carry his own stories, but sustaining reader interest month after month would require a different kind of storytelling approach. The creative team assembled for this challenge consisted of Chris Claremont as writer and John Buscema as artist, two creators whose combined experience and talent seemed perfectly suited to the task of exploring Logan's world in unprecedented depth. The decision to give Wolverine his own ongoing series was both a response to his growing popularity and a calculated risk on Marvel's part. Solo series required consistent creative vision and strong character development to maintain reader interest over time, particularly for a character whose mysterious nature had been one of his primary appeals. Claremont understood that revealing too much too quickly could diminish Logan's mystique, while revealing too little might leave readers feeling unsatisfied with each monthly installment. The solution that Claremont developed was to focus on Logan's relationships and internal struggles rather than simply cataloguing his adventures. Each storyline would reveal aspects of his character through his interactions with others, allowing readers to understand him better while preserving the essential mystery of his past. This approach would prove to be both critically successful and commercially viable, establishing a template for character-driven superhero storytelling that would influence the industry for decades. Central to this new ongoing narrative was the introduction of Victor Creed, better known as Sabertooth, as Logan's primary recurring antagonist. While Sabertooth had appeared in comics before, his connection to Logan had never been fully explored. Claremont's vision was to create a villain who was not just physically threatening but psychologically significant. Someone whose very existence forced Logan to confront the darkest aspects of his own nature. Sabertooth represented everything that Logan could become if he abandoned his struggle to maintain his humanity. Like Logan, Victor possessed enhanced physical abilities, accelerated healing, and an extended lifespan that had allowed him to survive for decades or perhaps centuries. Yet where Logan fought constantly to control his animal instincts and channel his aggression toward constructive purposes, Sabertooth had embraced his predatory nature completely, becoming a creature of pure malice and sadistic pleasure. The relationship between Logan and Victor was complex in ways that went far beyond simple hero-villain dynamics. Claremont hinted at a shared history that extended back decades, suggesting encounters and connections that Logan's damaged memory could not fully recall. This created a situation where Sabertooth knew more about Logan's past than Logan himself did, giving the villain a psychological advantage that was perhaps more dangerous than any physical threat he might pose. The annual birthday tradition that Sabertooth established became one of the most psychologically disturbing elements in all of superhero comics. Every year, on what he claimed was Logan's birthday, Victor would track him down and attempt to kill him, not because he had any realistic hope of succeeding, but because he wanted to remind Logan that his past was never truly behind him. These encounters served as a form of psychological torture, designed to prevent Logan from ever finding peace or moving beyond the violence that had shaped his early life. Claremont's genius in developing this dynamic lay in his understanding that the birthday beatings were as much about what they revealed about Logan as what they showed about Sabertooth. Logan's response to these attacks, his refusal to kill Victor even when he had the opportunity, his determination to absorb the punishment rather than escalate the violence, demonstrated the depth of his commitment to his chosen path of heroism and self-control. The introduction of Silver Fox as Logan's first great love added another layer of tragedy to his relationship with Sabertooth. Through fragmented memories and Victor's taunting revelations, readers learned that Logan had once found happiness with a woman who saw past his rough exterior to the man beneath. Their life together in a remote cabin represented the possibility of peace and normalcy that Logan had always craved but never been able to sustain. Silver Fox's murder at Sabertooth's hands was presented not as a simple act of villainy, but as a deliberate attempt to corrupt Logan's soul. Victor understood that killing the woman Logan loved would force him to choose between revenge and his moral principles. The psychological damage inflicted by this loss went far deeper than any physical wound, creating scars that Logan's healing factor could never address. The complexity of Logan's response to Silver Fox's death revealed the sophisticated character development that Claremont was bringing to the series. Rather than seeking immediate revenge, Logan chose to carry his grief and guilt as burdens that reminded him why he fought to protect others from experiencing similar losses. This choice demonstrated remarkable moral strength, while also explaining the deep sadness and sense of responsibility that colored all of his subsequent relationships. John Buscema's artistic interpretation of these psychological themes was masterful in its subtlety and emotional depth. His Logan was a figure of barely controlled power, someone whose physical presence suggested both protection and danger, depending on the circumstances. Buscema understood that the most effective comic book art serves the story rather than overwhelming it, and his clean, dynamic style provided the perfect visual framework for Claremont's character-driven narratives. The supporting cast that developed around Logan during these early issues of his solo series reflected Claremont's understanding that even the most independent hero needed connections to other people in order to remain human. Characters like Archie Corrigan, a corrupt but fundamentally decent police detective, and Lindsay McCabe, Jesse Drew's friend, and a former stuntman, provided Logan with anchors to the normal human world that he was fighting to protect. The criminal underworld of Madripoor became a recurring setting for many of Logan's solo adventures, providing a backdrop that was exotic enough to justify spectacular action sequences while also allowing for more intimate character development. The fictional Southeast Asian nation served as a place where Logan could operate under the identity of Patch, a mysterious figure whose eye patch disguise fooled absolutely no one, but provided a useful fiction for those who preferred not to acknowledge his true identity. The Patch persona allowed Logan to explore different aspects of his personality while maintaining some distance from his X-Men responsibilities. As Patch, he could be more morally flexible, more willing to work within grey areas and make compromises that might be problematic for an official X-Men member. This freedom was essential for the kinds of stories that Claremont wanted to tell, narratives that dealt with corruption, betrayal, and the sometimes necessary choice between competing evils. The relationship between Logan and Jessica Drew, the original Spider-Woman, became one of the most important connections in his solo series. Their friendship was built on mutual respect and shared experience rather than romantic attraction, creating a partnership that was both personally meaningful and professionally effective. Jessica's background as a former agent of Hydra gave her insights into the world of international espionage and criminal conspiracy that complemented Logan's more direct approach to problem solving. The exploration of Logan's extended lifespan during this period added new dimensions to his character, while also creating opportunities for historical storylines that placed him in significant events from the past several decades. Claremont was careful to use these glimpses of Logan's history sparingly, understanding that mystery was one of the character's greatest assets and that too much revelation could diminish his appeal. The 1993 Fatal Attractions crossover event marked a turning point in Logan's story that would have ramifications lasting for years. The storyline, which involved Magneto's return and his increasingly militant approach to human-mutant relations, culminated in one of the most shocking moments in X-Men history, when the Master of Magnetism used his powers to forcibly extract the adamantium from Logan's skeleton. This scene was both visually spectacular and emotionally devastating, showing Logan's invulnerable adamantium skeleton being literally torn from his body while he screamed in agony. The process nearly killed him, and it certainly would have killed any normal person. Only his healing factor allowed him to survive the trauma, but the experience left him fundamentally changed in ways that went far beyond the mere loss of his metal skeleton. The revelation that Logan's claws were not technological additions but actual bone that had been coated with adamantium added a new layer to his origin story, while also explaining how he could continue to function as a hero even after losing his metal enhancements. The sight of his bone claws emerging for the first time was both shocking and somehow more disturbing than his adamantium versions had ever been, emphasizing the organic, animal nature of his abilities. The psychological impact of losing his adamantium was perhaps even more significant than the physical trauma. Logan had come to define himself in part through his invulnerability, his ability to withstand any attack and recover from any injury. Without his metal skeleton, he was forced to confront his own mortality in ways he had not experienced for decades, creating a vulnerability that was both terrifying and potentially liberating. The temporary feral state that Logan entered following the adamantium removal represented a regression to a more primitive psychological condition, one where his animal instincts dominated his human reasoning. This transformation was disturbing for his friends and allies to witness, as they saw the man they knew and respected seemingly disappearing beneath layers of savage instinct and predatory behavior. Claremont's handling of Logan's recovery from this trauma was sensitive and psychologically realistic, showing how someone might struggle to rebuild their identity after experiencing such a fundamental violation. The process was neither quick nor simple, requiring Logan to rediscover who he was without the invulnerability that had shaped his approach to life and heroism for so long. The return of Logan's adamantium through his unwilling service as one of Apocalypse's horsemen added another layer of moral complexity to his story. Faced with the choice between accepting his weakened condition or allowing Sabertooth to become death in his place, Logan made the pragmatic decision to accept rebonding with the metal that had defined so much of his existence. This decision represented both a defeat and a victory for Logan's moral development. On one hand, he had compromised with evil in order to prevent a greater evil from occurring. On the other hand, He had demonstrated his willingness to sacrifice his own preferences and principles when the stakes were high enough to justify such sacrifice. The experience left him with new appreciation for the weight of difficult choices and the sometimes unavoidable necessity of accepting lesser evils to prevent greater ones. The struggle to break free from Apocalypse's mental conditioning provided Logan with an opportunity to demonstrate the strength of will and moral conviction that had always been his greatest weapons. His ability to resist the death persona and eventually turn against his supposed master showed that his essential humanity remained intact, despite all the attempts that had been made to corrupt or control it. The relationships that sustained Logan during this difficult period demonstrated the importance of the connections he had built over the years with his fellow X-Men and other allies. Storm's unwavering faith in his essential goodness, Jean Grey's telepathic support, and Scott Summers' tactical leadership all played crucial roles in helping him maintain his identity and purpose during his time as Death. The experience of serving Apocalypse, even unwillingly, left Logan with a deeper understanding of the seductive nature of power and the constant vigilance required to resist corruption. He had seen firsthand how easy it could be to justify terrible actions in service of supposedly noble goals, and this knowledge made him more compassionate toward others who had made similar compromises, while also strengthening his resolve to resist such temptations in the future. The return to his brown and gold costume following his liberation from Apocalypse's control symbolized Logan's renewed commitment to the values and relationships that had sustained him through his darkest periods. The familiar uniform represented not just a return to his heroic identity, but also a recommitment to the ongoing struggle between his savage nature and his human aspirations. The long-term impact of the Fatal Attractions storyline on Logan's character development was profound and lasting. The experience of vulnerability, corruption, and redemption had tested every aspect of his identity, while ultimately confirming the strength of his moral core. He emerged from the ordeal, changed, but not broken, wiser, but not cynical, more aware of his limitations, but also more confident in his essential values. The supporting characters who had sustained Logan during this crisis became even more important to his ongoing story, as he came to understand more fully how much he depended on their friendship, loyalty, and moral support. His relationships with Storm, Jean, Scott, and others deepened as a result of shared struggle, creating bonds that would endure through many future challenges and transformations. As Logan's solo adventures continued into the mid-1990s, the foundation that had been established during these crucial early years provided a solid base for further character development and storytelling innovation. The themes of family, loss, redemption, and the ongoing struggle between civilization and savagery would continue to resonate through his stories, but they had been given depth and complexity through the trials he had endured and overcome. The success of Logan's solo series during this period demonstrated that readers were hungry for more mature and psychologically complex superhero stories, paving the way for the darker, more introspective comics that would dominate the industry throughout the remainder of the decade. Logan's journey from mysterious loner to complex anti-hero had established new possibilities for what superhero comics could achieve in terms of character development and thematic sophistication. The transition from the 1990s into the new millennium brought with it a fundamental shift in how Logan understood his place in the world and his responsibility to those around him. The mysterious loner who had once defined himself through violence and isolation was gradually evolving into something unprecedented in his long and often tragic history. A teacher, a mentor, and ultimately the leader of an institution dedicated to nurturing the next generation of mutants. This transformation did not happen overnight, nor was it without struggle and resistance from Logan himself. but it represented perhaps the most significant character development in his entire publication history. The establishment of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning marked a pivotal moment, not just in Logan's personal journey, but in the broader narrative of mutant education and Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence. When Logan made the decision to break away from Scott Summers and the more militant direction that the X-Men had taken, he was choosing to embrace a philosophy that emphasized hope over pragmatism, education over warfare, and the belief that young mutants deserved the chance to discover their potential without being immediately conscripted into an ongoing conflict. The decision to name the school after Jean Grey was deeply meaningful for Logan, representing his commitment to honoring the memory of someone who had embodied the best aspects of Xavier's vision, while also acknowledging the personal loss that had shaped so much of his own development. Jean's influence on Logan had been profound and lasting, teaching him that strength could be gentle and that true power lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to protect and nurture others. The physical establishment of the school in Westchester County, New York, near the site of the original Xavier Institute, was both practical and symbolic. The location provided access to the resources and connections that would be necessary for running an effective educational institution, while also maintaining continuity with the legacy of mutant education that Charles Xavier had begun decades earlier. Yet, Logan was determined that his school would be different from its predecessor, reflecting lessons learned from both the successes and failures of previous attempts at mutant education. The curriculum that Logan developed for the Jean Grey School represented a radical departure from traditional approaches to superhero training. While physical conditioning and power development remained important components of the educational program, equal emphasis was placed on academic subjects, creative expression, and most importantly, the development of ethical reasoning and moral judgment. Logan understood from his own painful experience that having extraordinary abilities without the wisdom to use them responsibly was a recipe for tragedy and suffering. The staff that Logan assembled for the school reflected his understanding that effective education required diverse perspectives and specialized expertise. Rather than relying solely on other X-Men to serve as instructors, he recruited teachers from various backgrounds and disciplines, creating an environment where students could benefit from exposure to different approaches to learning and problem solving. This diversity of educational philosophy helped ensure that students would develop into well-rounded individuals rather than simply effective fighters. The student body of the Jean Grey School presented Logan with challenges that were both familiar and entirely new. Many of the young mutants who came to the school carried emotional and psychological burdens that were remarkably similar to those that Logan himself had struggled with throughout his life. They had experienced rejection, fear, and misunderstanding from the humans around them, and they arrived at the school with varying degrees of anger, confusion, and damaged self-worth. Logan's approach to working with these troubled young people was informed by his own experiences of healing and growth within the X-Men family. He understood that trust had to be earned rather than demanded, that respect was a two-way street, and that the most important lessons were often learned through example rather than through formal instruction. His willingness to be vulnerable with his students, to share his own mistakes and struggles, created an atmosphere of honesty and authenticity that was essential for genuine learning and personal development. The relationship between Logan and his students was complex in ways that reflected both his strengths and his limitations as an educator. His extensive life experience and hard-won wisdom made him uniquely qualified to help young people navigate the challenges of discovering their powers and finding their place in the world. Yet his own struggles with emotional expression and his tendency to solve problems through direct action sometimes created barriers to effective communication and understanding. One of the most significant relationships that developed during Logan's time as headmaster was his connection with various young female students who reminded him of other important figures from his past. The pattern that had begun with Kitty Pryde and continued with characters like Jubilee was repeated with several students at the Jean Grey School, as Logan found himself drawn to mentor young women who embodied qualities of innocence, hope, and potential that he felt compelled to protect and nurture. These mentorship relationships were particularly meaningful for Logan because they allowed him to channel his protective instincts in positive directions, while also providing him with a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival or conflict resolution. Through his interactions with these students, he was able to experience aspects of fatherhood and family connection that his traumatic past had largely denied him, creating bonds that were both professionally appropriate and deeply personal. The introduction of Laura Kinney, known as X-23, into Logan's life represented perhaps the most complex and emotionally charged relationship of his entire career as an educator and mentor. Laura was Logan's genetic clone, created by a shadowy organization that had sought to replicate the success of the original Weapon X program while making improvements to the process and the final product. Her existence forced Logan to confront questions about identity, legacy, and responsibility that he had never previously had to address. Laura's background was in many ways even more tragic than Logan's own, where he had lived a life before his capture and transformation. She had been created specifically to be a weapon, raised from childhood in an environment of systematic abuse and conditioning, designed to eliminate any trace of normal human emotion or connection. Her entire existence had been shaped by violence and manipulation, leaving her with few reference points for understanding concepts like love, trust, or family. Logan's initial reaction to learning about Laura's existence was complex and often contradictory. On one hand, he felt a deep sense of responsibility for her situation, recognizing that her suffering was directly connected to his own experiences with the Weapon X program. On the other hand, he struggled with questions about what it meant to be responsible for someone who was essentially his daughter, but who had been created without his knowledge or consent. The process of building a relationship with Laura required Logan to develop new skills and perspectives that went far beyond his previous experiences with mentorship. Laura's conditioning had been so thorough and so brutal that normal approaches to trust building and emotional connection were largely ineffective. She had been programmed to suppress emotional responses and to view human relationships primarily in terms of tactical advantages and potential threats. Logan's approach to helping Laura recover from her traumatic past was patient and persistent, drawing on his own experience of healing from the psychological damage inflicted by his captors. He understood that forcing the process would likely be counterproductive and potentially harmful, so he focused on creating an environment of safety and consistency while allowing Laura to develop emotional connections at her own pace. The relationship between Logan and Laura was complicated by the presence of Gabby, another clone who had been created as part of the same program but who had somehow managed to retain more of her natural emotional capacity. Gabby's presence provided Logan with insights into what Laura might have been like if she had not been subjected to such intensive conditioning, while also creating a family dynamic that was both healing and challenging for all involved. The exploration of Logan's biological son Dakin added another layer of complexity to his evolving understanding of family and responsibility. Dakin's existence revealed aspects of Logan's past that he had forgotten or suppressed, including a romantic relationship that had produced a child who had grown up without knowing his father's identity or true nature. The relationship between Logan and Dakin was complicated by decades of separation, manipulation by outside forces, and fundamental differences in their approaches to morality and human connection. Dakin's antagonistic attitude toward Logan reflected the pain and abandonment that he had experienced growing up without a father figure, combined with manipulation by individuals who had sought to use him as a weapon against Logan and the X-Men. Their relationship was marked by conflict and mistrust, as each struggled to understand the other's perspective while dealing with their own emotional baggage and preconceptions. The development of what became known as the Wolverine family represented a new chapter in Logan's personal evolution, as he found himself at the center of a network of relationships that were based on both biological and chosen connections. This extended family included not just Laura, Gabby, and Dakin, but also various students, colleagues, and allies who had become important parts of his support system and emotional well-being. The Old Man Logan storyline, created by writer Mark Millar and artist Steve McNiven, provided a dark counterpoint to Logan's more hopeful development as an educator and family man. Set in a dystopian future where supervillains had succeeded in conquering America and killing most of the world's heroes, the story presented a version of Logan who had been so traumatized by his failure to protect those he cared about that he had abandoned his heroic identity entirely. This alternate version of Logan had retreated to a simple life as a farmer, refusing to use his claws or engage in violence even when threatened or provoked. His pacifism was not born of moral conviction, but of psychological trauma, as he struggled with guilt over his role in the death of his fellow X-Men and his failure to prevent the villain's victory. The story served as a meditation on the long-term psychological costs of a life spent in constant conflict and the difficulty of finding peace after experiencing profound loss. The journey that the older Logan undertook with Hawkeye across the villain-controlled wasteland of America provided opportunities to explore themes of redemption, legacy, and the possibility of finding hope even in the darkest circumstances. Logan's gradual re-engagement with his heroic identity was portrayed not as a simple return to his old ways, but as a hard-fought victory over despair and self-doubt. The relationship between Logan and the baby, who was the last surviving member of the Hulk's family, served as a symbol of hope and renewal, representing the possibility that even in the darkest timeline, new beginnings were still possible. Logan's decision to care for the child demonstrated that his capacity for love and protection had survived even the most devastating experiences, providing a foundation for rebuilding both his own life and the world around him. The success of the Old Man Logan storyline led to its adaptation in the film Logan, which provided Hugh Jackman's portrayal of the character with a fitting conclusion while exploring many of the same themes of aging, legacy, and the possibility of redemption through sacrifice. The film's focus on Logan's relationship with Laura and his role as a reluctant father figure provided emotional depth and resonance that elevated it beyond typical superhero entertainment. The themes of family, legacy, and the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next that were explored through Logan's relationships with his biological and chosen children reflected broader changes in how superhero comics approached character development and long-term storytelling. Rather than maintaining the illusion of perpetual youth and unchanging relationships, creators began to embrace the possibilities that came with allowing characters to age, grow, and take on new roles and responsibilities. Logan's evolution from lone wolf to patriarch represented one of the most successful examples of this approach to character development, showing how a character's essential nature could remain consistent while still allowing for significant growth and change over time. His journey from weapon to protector to teacher to father provided a template for how superhero narratives could explore themes of redemption, responsibility, and the possibility of positive change even for the most damaged individuals. The impact of Logan's role as an educator and family man extended beyond his own character development to influence the broader X-Men mythology and the way that mutant stories were told. His approach to education and mentorship provided an alternative to the more militaristic models that had sometimes dominated X-Men stories, emphasizing hope and potential over conflict and survival. The Jean Grey School for Higher Learning became a symbol of the possibility that mutants could be more than just soldiers in an ongoing war between species. It represented the idea that education, understanding, and moral development could provide paths forward that violence and conflict could not, offering young mutants the opportunity to define themselves through their choices and values, rather than simply through their powers and abilities. The success of Logan's educational endeavors also demonstrated the importance of institutional leadership and vision in creating positive change. His willingness to take responsibility not just for individual students but for the broader project of mutant education showed how personal growth and social progress could be interconnected, with individual transformation contributing to larger cultural and political changes. As Logan's role as headmaster continued to evolve, he found himself grappling with administrative and political challenges that were very different from the physical confrontations that had defined much of his earlier life. Funding, curriculum development, regulatory compliance, and community relations all required skills and perspectives that his previous experiences had not prepared him for, forcing him to grow in new directions while maintaining his essential commitment to protecting and nurturing young mutants. The relationships that Logan developed with parents, government officials, and community leaders during his time as headmaster provided him with new insights into the complexity of human-mutant relations and the many factors that influence public attitudes toward mutant rights and integration. These experiences helped him develop a more nuanced understanding of the challenges facing the mutant community, while also reinforcing his belief in the importance of education and dialogue in creating positive change. The legacy of Logan's work as an educator and family man would continue to influence his character development and the broader X-Men mythology long after his formal role as headmaster had ended. The relationships he had built, the lives he had touched, and the institutions he had helped create would all serve as testament to the possibility of positive transformation and the power of choosing hope over despair, even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. The 1990s revolutionized how superhero characters could reach audiences beyond the traditional comic book readership, and Logan found himself at the forefront of this multimedia expansion. As creators recognized his potential to connect with viewers across different age groups and cultural backgrounds. The first major step in this evolution came with X-Men, the animated series, which premiered in 1992 and would fundamentally reshape how an entire generation understood mutant characters and their struggles for acceptance in a hostile world. The animated series faced the challenging task of translating Logan's complex personality and violent tendencies into a format that could be broadcast on Saturday morning television, while still maintaining the essential elements that made the character compelling. The creative team, led by producer Will Mugniot and head writer Eric Lewald, understood that Logan's appeal went far deeper than his capacity for violence, and they worked to emphasize his protective instincts, his loyalty to his teammates, and his role as a reluctant mentor figure within the X-Men family. Cal Dodd's voice performance as Logan became the definitive interpretation of the character for millions of viewers who had never read a comic book. Dodd brought a gravelly, weathered quality to Logan's dialogue that perfectly captured both his rough exterior and his underlying vulnerability. The voice actor's ability to convey complex emotions through subtle changes in tone and inflection allowed the animated Logan to express feelings and thoughts that might have required pages of comic book narrative to communicate effectively. The animated series made several crucial decisions about how to present Logan's character that would influence all subsequent adaptations. Rather than focusing on the mystery of his past, The show emphasized his present relationships and responsibilities, showing him as someone who had found his place within the X-Men family, despite his natural inclination towards solitude. This approach made him more accessible to younger viewers while also demonstrating the character growth that had occurred during his years with the team. The visual design of the animated Logan drew heavily from his classic comic book appearance while making adjustments necessary for television animation. His distinctive hairstyle, compact muscular build, and iconic costume were all carefully translated into a form that could be animated consistently across multiple episodes and different animation teams. The challenge of depicting his claws and healing factor within the constraints of broadcast television standards led to creative solutions that maintained the impact of these elements while making them appropriate for younger audiences. The relationships that defined Logan's role within the animated X-Men were developed with particular attention to their educational and inspirational value. His mentoring relationship with younger team members, especially Jubilee, provided opportunities to explore themes of guidance, protection, and the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next. These relationships were portrayed with genuine warmth and affection, showing Logan's capacity for gentleness despite his fierce reputation. The romantic tension between Logan and Jean Grey that had been a significant element in the comic books was handled with subtlety and maturity in the animated series. Rather than creating a soap opera dynamic, the show used this relationship to explore themes of unrequited love, loyalty, and the sometimes painful necessity of putting others' happiness before your own desires. Logan's respect for Jean's relationship with Scott Summers demonstrated his growth as a character and his commitment to the greater good of the team. The success of X-Men. The animated series created new opportunities for Logan to appear in other forms of media, including video games that allowed players to experience his abilities and adventures in interactive formats. The early X-Men games of the 1990s introduced Logan to gaming audiences who might not have been familiar with the character from other sources, establishing his reputation as a formidable fighter whose abilities made him particularly well-suited for action-oriented gameplay. The transition from animation to live-action film represented perhaps the most significant challenge in Logan's multimedia evolution, as it required finding an actor who could embody the character's physical presence, emotional complexity, and distinctive personality in a realistic setting. The casting process for the first X-Men film became legendary within the entertainment industry, as various actors were considered for a role that would ultimately define both the character's cinematic future and the career of whoever was chosen to portray him. Hugh Jackman's selection as Logan was initially met with skepticism from some fans who questioned whether the tall, lean Australian actor could convincingly portray the short, stocky Canadian character from the comics. These concerns were quickly dispelled when Jackman's performance demonstrated that he had captured something essential about Logan's spirit and personality that transcended physical appearance. His interpretation emphasized the character's fundamental decency and capacity for growth, while never losing sight of the pain and trauma that had shaped his worldview. The physical transformation that Jackman underwent to prepare for the role became almost as legendary as his performance itself. His commitment to building the muscular physique and developing the fighting skills necessary to make Logan's combat abilities believable on screen set a new standard for superhero performances and demonstrated the level of dedication required to bring such iconic characters to life convincingly. Jackman's portrayal of Logan in the first X-Men film established many of the characteristics that would define the character's cinematic incarnation throughout 17 years and 9 film appearances. His Logan was simultaneously vulnerable and dangerous, capable of both tender moments and explosive violence, always struggling to balance his desire for isolation with his need for human connection. This complexity made him the emotional center of the X-Men film franchise, and the character that audiences most strongly identified with throughout the series. The success of the X-Men films created a feedback loop that influenced how Logan was portrayed in other media, including comics, animation, and video games. Elements of Jackman's interpretation began appearing in comic book stories, while animated versions of the character increasingly incorporated physical and personality traits that had been established in the films. This cross-pollination between different forms of media created a more unified vision of Logan, while also allowing each medium to explore different aspects of his character. X-Men Evolution, which premiered in 2000 and reimagined the X-Men as teenagers attending a regular high school, presented Logan in a significantly different role from previous animated interpretations. In this version, he served as a teacher and mentor figure to younger characters who were still discovering their powers and learning to navigate the challenges of adolescence alongside their mutant abilities. This portrayal emphasized his capacity for guidance and protection, while also showing how his experiences and wisdom could benefit those who were just beginning their own journeys of self-discovery. The visual design of Logan in X-Men Evolution deliberately incorporated elements from Hugh Jackman's film portrayal, creating a visual bridge between the animated and live-action versions of the character. This decision reflected the growing importance of maintaining consistency across different media presentations of the same character, as audiences increasingly expected their favorite characters to feel familiar, regardless of the specific format in which they encountered them. The voice performance by Scott McNeil brought a different energy to the animated Logan while still maintaining the essential characteristics that defined the character. McNeil's interpretation was somewhat more paternal and less gravelly than Cal Dodd's version, reflecting the character's role as a teacher and mentor within the context of the series. This variation demonstrated how the same character could be adapted to serve different narrative functions while remaining recognizably true to his core identity. The second X-Men film, X2, X-Men United, provided opportunities to explore Logan's past through the return to the Weapon X facility, where his transformation had taken place. This storyline allowed the films to delve deeper into the character's psychological trauma, while also providing spectacular action sequences that showcased his abilities and his determination to uncover the truth about his ability. Origins. The film's handling of these themes was both exciting and emotionally resonant, proving that superhero films could address serious subjects while still delivering the entertainment value that audiences expected. Jackman's performance in X2 demonstrated his growing comfort with the character and his increasing ability to convey Logan's internal struggles through subtle facial expressions and body language. The scenes exploring Logan's fractured memories and his confrontation with the scientists responsible for his transformation showcased the actor's dramatic range, while also advancing the character's ongoing journey of self-discovery and healing. The failure of X-Men. The last stand to live up to the standards established by its predecessors became a cautionary tale about the importance of maintaining creative consistency and character integrity across multiple installments of a franchise. While Logan remained one of the film's strongest elements, the overall narrative problems demonstrated how even well-established characters could be undermined by poor storytelling choices and inadequate attention to the themes and relationships that made them compelling. The decision to focus the film on the Dark Phoenix storyline, while simultaneously introducing a mutant cure subplot, created narrative confusion that prevented either concept from receiving the development it deserved. Logan's role in both storylines showcased Jackman's continued commitment to the character But even his strong performance could not overcome the fundamental structural problems that plagued the film's script and direction. The animated series Wolverine and the X-Men, which premiered in 2008, represented another significant evolution in how Logan could be portrayed in animation. This series placed Logan in the leadership role that had traditionally been filled by Professor Xavier or Cyclops, forcing him to grapple with responsibilities and challenges that went far beyond his usual role as the team's muscle or moral compass. The series explored how someone who had always been more comfortable as a follower or lone wolf could adapt to become an effective leader and decision-maker. Steve Blum's voice performance as Logan in Wolverine and the X-Men brought a new gravitas and authority to the character that reflected his expanded role within the team dynamic. Blum's interpretation maintained the roughness and edge that were essential to Logan's personality, while also conveying the wisdom and experience that made him capable of guiding and inspiring others. This balance between toughness and leadership became a defining characteristic of the series and influenced how Logan would be portrayed in subsequent animated projects. The series also explored Logan's relationships with his teammates in greater depth than had been possible in previous animated adaptations. His evolving dynamic with Storm, his complicated history with Jean Grey, and his mentoring relationship with younger mutants all received significant attention throughout the show's single season. These relationship-focused storylines demonstrated how Logan's character had matured over the years, while also providing emotional stakes that elevated the series beyond simple action-adventure entertainment. The visual design and animation quality of Wolverine and the X-Men represented a significant advancement over previous X-Men animated series, taking advantage of improvements in animation technology to create more dynamic action sequences and more expressive character animation. Logan's fight scenes in particular benefited from these technical improvements, allowing for more fluid and impactful depictions of his combat abilities, while maintaining the character's distinctive fighting style and tactical approach. The direct-to-video animated film Hulk vs. Wolverine provided Logan with an opportunity to engage in the kind of sustained, brutal combat that was difficult to achieve within the constraints of ongoing television series. The film's focus on the physical confrontation between Logan and the Hulk allowed for an exploration of both characters' capacity for violence, while also examining the psychological factors that drove their conflict and eventual mutual respect. The film's depiction of Logan's history with the Weapon X program and his connections to other characters from that organization provided additional context for understanding his motivations and relationships. The inclusion of characters like Sabertooth, Deadpool, and Lady Deathstrike created a more complete picture of Logan's past, while also delivering the action sequences that fans expected from a Wolverine-focused story. The success of these various animated and live-action adaptations demonstrated Logan's versatility as a character and his ability to work effectively in different formats and contexts, whether serving as a team leader, a mentor figure, a lone wolf, or a reluctant hero. Logan's essential characteristics remained consistent while allowing each adaptation to emphasize different aspects of his personality and abilities. The influence of these multimedia adaptations on Logan's comic book appearances became increasingly evident throughout the 2000s, as creators incorporated elements and interpretations that had proven successful in other media. This cross-pollination enriched the character's comic book stories, while also creating a more unified vision of Logan across all forms of media. The development of Logan's character across these various adaptations also reflected broader changes in how superhero characters were understood and presented to audiences. The emphasis on psychological complexity, emotional depth, and realistic consequences that characterized the best Logan stories influenced how other characters were developed and how superhero narratives approached themes of trauma, healing, and personal growth. The educational and inspirational value of Logan's multimedia appearances extended beyond entertainment to influence how audiences understood concepts of resilience, redemption, and the possibility of positive change. His journey from mysterious loner to beloved mentor figure provided a template for character development that resonated with viewers of all ages and backgrounds. The technical innovations that were developed to bring Logan's abilities to life in animation and live action also influenced how other superhero characters were presented in visual media. The techniques used to depict his healing factor, his claws, and his enhanced senses became part of the visual vocabulary of superhero entertainment, influencing countless other projects and characters. As Logan's multimedia presence continued to expand throughout the 2000s, each new adaptation built upon the foundation established by previous versions while also bringing fresh perspectives and interpretations to the character. This cumulative development created a richer and more complete understanding of Logan that enhanced appreciation for all versions of the character, regardless of the specific medium in which audiences encountered him. The lasting impact of Logan's multimedia evolution can be measured not just in commercial success or critical acclaim, but in the genuine emotional connections that audiences developed with the character across different formats and contexts. His ability to inspire, entertain, and educate viewers, while maintaining his essential identity and values, became a testament to the power of well-crafted character development and the importance of treating beloved fictional characters with respect and understanding. The dawn of the 21st century's second decade brought with it a creative revolution that would fundamentally reshape not just Logan's story, but the entire landscape of the X-Men universe. Writer Jonathan Hickman arrived at Marvel Comics with a vision so comprehensive and ambitious that it would take years to fully unfold, beginning with the seemingly simple premise that the relationship between humans and mutants had reached a critical juncture that demanded radical new approaches to coexistence, survival, and the very definition of what it meant to be a hero in an increasingly complex world. Hickman's House of X and Powers of X limited series, published in 2019, introduced concepts that seemed almost impossibly sophisticated for mainstream superhero comics. The revelation that Moira McTaggart was herself a mutant whose power involved living through multiple lifetimes, retaining memories and knowledge across incarnations, provided a framework for understanding the cyclical nature of human-mutant conflict, while also suggesting that traditional approaches to resolving that conflict had been fundamentally inadequate. This temporal perspective allowed Hickman to reframe Logan's entire existence within a larger historical context, showing how his extended lifespan and accumulated experiences positioned him as one of the few individuals who could understand both the patterns that had repeated throughout mutant history and the genuine possibilities for breaking free from those cycles. Logan's role in this new paradigm was not simply as a warrior or protector, but as a witness to history and a bridge between different eras of mutant experience. The establishment of the mutant nation of Krakoa represented perhaps the most radical development in X-Men mythology since the series' inception. The living island that had once been an enemy became a homeland, a place where mutants could live according to their own laws and values, while also serving as a symbol of mutant unity and self-determination. Logan's connection to Krakoa went back to his earliest days with the X-Men, making his role in this new society both historically significant and personally meaningful. The resurrection protocols that became central to Krakoan society fundamentally altered the relationship between life and death that had always been a crucial element of Logan's character development. His healing factor had made him functionally immortal, but the knowledge that death could still claim him had provided urgency and weight to his choices and relationships. The ability to bring back any mutant who had died changed not just the practical realities of heroic adventure, but also the philosophical foundations upon which mutant society was built. Logan's response to the resurrection protocols was complex and often contradictory, reflecting his deep-seated understanding of mortality and loss that had been shaped by decades of watching friends and loved ones die while he continued to survive. The promise that no mutant death would be permanent challenged his worldview in fundamental ways, forcing him to reconsider long-held beliefs about sacrifice, heroism, and the meaning of individual existence within the larger context of species survival. The X Lives of Wolverine and X Deaths of Wolverine storylines, crafted by writer Benjamin Percy, provided Logan with opportunities to explore these new realities, while also revisiting crucial moments from his past. Through the lens of time travel and alternate timeline manipulation, these narratives demonstrated how Logan's accumulated experiences and relationships had prepared him for the role he would need to play in protecting and preserving the mutant nation that Krakoa represented. The time-traveling adventures that took Logan through various periods of his own history allowed Percy to examine how different choices and circumstances might have led to different outcomes, both for Logan personally and for the broader mutant community. These explorations of alternate possibilities served to highlight the significance of the choices that had actually been made, while also demonstrating the complex web of cause and effect that connected Logan's personal journey to larger historical developments. The revelation that Logan had been present at Charles Xavier's birth, indirectly saving the future founder of the X-Men from threats that could have prevented his survival to adulthood, provided a new layer of meaning to Logan's long relationship with Xavier and his dream of peaceful coexistence. This temporal connection suggested that Logan's role in mutant history was even more fundamental than had previously been understood, making him not just a participant in Xavier's vision, but an essential element in making that vision possible. The confrontations with Omega Red that occurred throughout these time-traveling adventures served multiple narrative purposes, providing exciting action sequences, while also exploring themes of corruption, redemption, and the long-term consequences of choices made in moments of crisis. Omega Red's attempts to prevent Xavier's birth represented the kind of temporal manipulation that could unravel the entire foundation of mutant heroism, making Logan's role as protector of the timeline as important as his more traditional heroic activities. The living arrangements that developed on Krakoa created new opportunities for exploring Logan's relationships with his fellow mutants in contexts that were both more intimate and more politically complex than had been possible in previous storylines. The island nation's unique social structure and its emphasis on mutant unity and cooperation required adjustments from individuals who had spent decades operating within human society and according to human norms and expectations. The relationship between Logan, Jean Grey, and Scott Summers that developed during the Krakoan era represented a mature and sophisticated approach to romantic and emotional complexity that reflected both the character's personal growth and the more permissive social environment that Krakoa provided. The suggestion that their living arrangement might involve polyamorous elements challenged traditional superhero relationship dynamics, while also acknowledging the deep emotional connections that had developed among these characters over decades of shared experiences. This relationship dynamic was handled with subtlety and respect for all involved parties, avoiding sensationalism while exploring how individuals with such long histories and deep connections might navigate questions of love, loyalty, and commitment within a society that was not bound by conventional human social expectations. The arrangement reflected the characters' emotional maturity and their ability to prioritize their genuine feelings and needs over external expectations or traditional relationship models. Logan's role as a parent and family member continued to evolve during the Krakoan era, as his relationships with Laura, Gabby, and Dakin developed within the context of a society that provided new opportunities for mutant families to flourish without the external pressures and threats that had traditionally complicated such relationships. The island nation's protective environment allowed for more normal family interactions while also creating opportunities for these characters to contribute to the larger mutant community. The educational and mentoring responsibilities that Logan had embraced during his time as headmaster of the Jean Grey School continued on Krakoa, though in different forms and contexts. The island's approach to mutant development and training drew on Logan's accumulated experience and wisdom, while also incorporating new understanding of mutant abilities and potential that had emerged from the resurrection, protocols, and other Krakoan innovations. The broader political and social implications of Krakoan society required Logan to develop new skills and perspectives that went beyond his traditional roles as warrior and teacher. The island nation's relationships with human governments, its internal governance structures, and its long-term strategic planning all demanded forms of engagement and leadership that challenged Logan to grow in new directions while drawing on his extensive life experience. The Fall of X storyline that brought the Krakoan experiment to an end represented both a conclusion and a new beginning for Logan and the broader mutant community. The destruction of the mutant paradise that had seemed to offer permanent solutions to age-old problems forced all mutants to reconsider their approaches to survival and coexistence, while also demonstrating the resilience and adaptability that had always characterized the mutant community at its best. Logan's response to the fall of Krakoa reflected both his deep attachment to the community that had been built there and his understanding that meaningful change often required the willingness to abandon even successful approaches when circumstances demanded new solutions. His ability to adapt to the loss of Krakoa while maintaining his core values and relationships demonstrated the personal growth and flexibility that had always been among his greatest strengths. The transition to the From the Ashes era that followed the fall of Krakoa provided Logan with opportunities to return to some of his more traditional roles while also incorporating the lessons and experiences he had gained during the Krakoan period. The new X-Men lineup that emerged from this transition reflected both continuity with past approaches and innovation in response to changed circumstances and new challenges. Logan's inclusion in the new Uncanny X-Men team led by Rogue represented a return to his roots as a team member and collaborator, while also acknowledging his growth as a leader and mentor over the years. His relationship with Rogue as team leader created interesting dynamics that drew on their long history together, while also exploring how leadership roles could be shared and adapted to serve different team needs and circumstances. The New Orleans setting for the new X-Men headquarters provided Logan with a cultural and geographical context that was both familiar and fresh, offering opportunities to explore different aspects of his personality and abilities, while maintaining connections to the broader mutant community and its ongoing struggles for acceptance and survival. The city's unique history and cultural identity created possibilities for storytelling that could incorporate elements of mystery, adventure, and social commentary. The return of Chris Claremont to write new Wolverine stories represented both a homecoming and a new chapter in Logan's publication history. Claremont's decision to craft direct sequels to some of his most celebrated storylines provided opportunities to explore how Logan had changed and grown since those earlier adventures, while also examining how the world around him had crewed, evolved, and what new challenges and opportunities those changes had created. The Wolverine, Madripoor Knight storyline that Claremont developed as a follow-up to his classic Uncanny X-Men work allowed him to revisit characters and situations that had been crucial to Logan's development while updating them for contemporary contexts and sensibilities. The return to Madripoor and the exploration of Logan's connections to that criminal paradise provided opportunities for both nostalgia and innovation in equal measure. The deep cut series that Claremont crafted to fill in missing pieces of Logan's history demonstrated the ongoing appeal of the character's mysterious past and the continued potential for revealing new aspects of his long and complicated life. The promise to finally reveal what Logan had been doing immediately before his confrontation with the Reavers represented the kind of continuity payoff that long-term readers particularly appreciated. The celebration of Logan's 50th anniversary in comics provided an occasion for reflection on how the character had evolved over 5 decades, while also looking forward to future possibilities and developments. The milestone represented not just longevity but continued relevance and adaptability, demonstrating how well-created characters could remain vital and engaging across multiple generations of readers and creators. The integration of Logan's film legacy through Hugh Jackman's return in Deadpool and Wolverine created new opportunities for bridging different versions of the character, while also introducing him to audiences who might be encountering him for the first time. The multiverse elements that allowed different versions of Logan to interact and influence each other reflected broader trends in contemporary storytelling, while also honoring the character's long and varied history. The ongoing influence of Logan's character on broader popular culture continued to evolve during this period, as his themes of resilience, redemption, and the possibility of positive change remained relevant to audiences facing their own challenges and transformations. His journey from weapon to protector to teacher to family member provided a template for understanding how individuals could grow and change while maintaining their essential identity and values. The technical and artistic innovations that continued to emerge in Logan's stories during this period reflected both advances in comic book production and storytelling techniques, and the ongoing creative potential that the character represented. New artistic approaches, narrative structures, and thematic explorations all contributed to keeping the character fresh and relevant while honoring his established history and characteristics. As Logan's story continued to evolve through the From the Ashes era and beyond, the foundation that had been established over 50 years of publication provided a solid base for future development, while also allowing for innovation and experimentation that could keep the character relevant for new generations of readers. His essential appeal as a character who had overcome tremendous trauma and loss to find meaning, purpose, and family remained as compelling as ever. The lessons that Logan's story had taught about resilience, growth, and the possibility of redemption continued to resonate with readers facing their own challenges and transformations. His example of how someone could maintain their essential humanity while adapting to changing circumstances provided inspiration and guidance that transcended the boundaries of superhero entertainment to offer genuine wisdom about living with purpose and integrity in a complex and often difficult world. As our journey through Logan's long and winding path draws to a close, we find ourselves not at an ending, but at a moment of quiet reflection. For over 50 years, Wolverine has represented something fundamental about the human spirit: the capacity to endure, to grow, and to choose who we become, despite the darkness of our past. From the mysterious figure who first appeared in the Canadian wilderness to the reluctant teacher who learned that family extends beyond blood, Logan's story is ultimately about transformation. Not the physical transformation that gave him his claws and healing factor, but the slow, painful, beautiful transformation of a weapon into a protector, a loner into a mentor, a creature of rage into a guardian of hope. His adamantium skeleton may make him nearly indestructible, but it's his adamantium will that makes him truly unbreakable. In a world that often seems determined to reduce us to our worst impulses, Wolverine reminds us that we can always choose to be better than what others made us. So rest now, knowing that somewhere in the vast tapestry of stories, Logan continues his eternal watch, protecting those who cannot protect themselves and proving that even the most wounded heart can learn to love again. Sweet dreams, adamantium dreamers. The best there is at what he does is keeping watch while you sleep.